program session today with Dr. Lacey. My name is Michael and I'll be today's host. To introduce Dr. Lacey, he's a gastroenterologist at Texas Digestive Disease Consultants with a passion for financial management and career coaching. He's a board certified gastroenterologist and a master financial coach through Ramsey Solutions. Dr. Lacey is also the founder and CEO of the Scope of Medicine, where he helps mentor healthcare professionals on how to run a practice and manage finances. A couple of reminders before we begin. We encourage you to turn on your cameras. If you're able to, this session will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel where you can view for later times. Also, there will be a Q&A at the end of the session and you can mute at that time. You can also feel free to write in your questions in the chat at any time and we'll cover them during that time during the Q&A. But with that said, Dr. Lacey, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Suhas, for inviting me. I've been getting pumped about this for the last month or so since we first talked about it. So this is super exciting. I really enjoy this. It's been some years since I was in med school, but I still even longer since college. So I graduated from A&M, Texas A&M in 2005. And I remember very vividly all of my pre-med stuff. I remember all the MCAT. By the way, I took the MCAT cold. If any of you are thinking about doing that without doing a study course or test questions, I don't recommend that. That was not the best move. But I still remember all those times. It was, it's scary. It's frustrating. It's, how do you know if you're going to get in? I mean, there's just so many unknowns. And so I'm super excited to come and share with you guys a little bit about, sort of my story and hopefully maybe even get some of you interested in GI. I've got a great case study that we're going to go through, and I've got my chat window open. So I'm going to be asking some questions during the case study. I'd love to have you guys participate and feel free to ask questions, and we'll kind of pop through stuff. So I'm going to share my screen here with you guys, and then we'll talk about some stuff here, and hopefully you guys can see that. Let's see. All right. So Michael, Suhas, can you guys see the screen? Is that okay? Good to go. All righty. So I wanted to give this presentation a title. And so the title I came up with was "In Medicine and in Money, Things Aren't Always as They Seem." And so that'll be kind of the theme of our case study that we'll do here in a little bit. But it's also, I think the theme for what I want to talk about with regards to money, as Michael was saying, I'm very passionate about personal finance management. It's one of the reasons why I started the Scope of Practice, because I was seeing that people coming out of residency and fellowship were really excellently trained as physicians. I mean, just ready to rock. I mean, just really knew their stuff, and they're ready to take on the world. And then when it came to things like business and money and leadership and managing a team, most people were wildly deficient. And frankly, that's not surprising. I mean, I didn't learn any of that stuff in my medical school. I had the benefit of having an awesome experience in college that really gave me all of that learning. And I felt like that was something that needed to change. And so I'm super excited to get to talk to you guys about some of that today. So, let me give you kind of a little bit about my story and why GI is, obviously you probably already know that GI is the best specialty, but let me just reinforce that for you a little bit. As you'll see, when you start rotating on the various specialties, there's a sort of a merry war between all the specialties as to whose is the best. And everyone is very convinced that theirs is the best, but they're all wrong and I'm right. So, I really got into internal medicine during my third year of medical school. That's really what got me sold on the idea of doing internal medicine. I remember going to morning report that first day and hearing this great case study that they were bringing up and these awesome pictures and this really interesting discussion, and looking around and seeing people nerding out about all these, the differential diagnosis and how are we going to treat this guy and how are we going to fix it and what's going on. And I looked around and I said, these are my people. And I was just so excited. It just really clicked. It really fit. And up until then I'd done pediatrics, I'd done family medicine, I had done surgery, and nothing quite fit just right on the money. But internal medicine was just perfect for me. So I went to internal medicine residency. And so for those of you that are very early in your pre-med journey, I'm gonna make sure I get terminology right for you guys so you understand where we're coming from. So the normal pathway to becoming a physician is you do your 4 years of college, 4 to 6 to 8, however many you're doing, but your 4 years of college, you do 4 years of medical school, then you do a residency program, which is basically an extended apprenticeship. And then some people will elect to go on and do a fellowship training, which is a further extended apprenticeship in some specialty. And so I did my internal medicine residency, and then I did my GI fellowship. So in my residency was awesome. I did all of my training through the U.S. Navy. So I went to medical school on a Navy scholarship, and then did all of my training in San Diego at the Naval Medical Center out there. And so during my second year, I got to do some rotations and got to do some elective rotations. And I was really excited to start exploring some of the different specialties and think about, what am I really excited about doing and what really just gets me going. And I had it narrowed down to three things. I had it narrowed down to hematology, oncology, infectious disease, and GI. And primarily that was because of the type of diseases that we get to take care of, the medicine that we get to practice. I found those kinds of things very interesting. Even during medical school, I just really found all three of those units very, very fun, very engaging, and really thought that that's where I could sink my teeth. And so I did a hem-onc rotation. And, one of the things that was very surprising to me about hem-onc, I really thought that hematology oncology was going to be really sad. That's what I really expected, because I had this vision of, just all these people that are sad and sick in the hospital, just the sickest of the sick, neutropenic fever and just horribly, horribly depressed bone marrow and weird infections. And I thought it was just going to be terribly sad, but that's actually a fairly small percentage of hem-onc. They just, in the outpatient setting, they get success after success after success. The people you're seeing are 6-month remission, 1-year remission, 5-year remission, just over and over and over again. It was really uplifting, but unfortunately for me, the treatment strategies they had, I found to be frightfully uninteresting, which I was kind of surprised about, but I just really didn't feel like it was just interesting to me. It was very algorithmic. It was very much like a cookbook. You have stage 4B melanoma. So you're going to do this many cycles of chemotherapy of this type. You're going to do this many cycles of radiation. Then you're going to do these, monitoring systems, and it's all very set. It's all very protocolized, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that particularly, but I didn't feel like it was as dynamic as I wanted it to be. So that kind of eliminated hem-onc. And then I was stuck between infectious disease and GI. And the thing I liked about both of them is that there was just a lot of variety. Really enjoyed the variety. So for infectious disease, you think about it, you're talking pulmonary infectious disease, neuro infectious disease, urology, gynecology, GI, cardiac, dermatology. There's just so many systems that cross over. And so you really get to do a lot of things. GI has kind of the same thing. So in GI, I have 7 different organs that I deal with. Cardiology gets 1, right? Pulmonology gets 1. I have 7. And so there's a lot of different ways that my organs can get sick. And that just gave me a lot of different things that I could really jump into with both feet. The liver is vastly, immensely complex. The luminal GI system, so the primary gut, the esophagus, the stomach, the small and large intestine, there's just so many ways for it to get sick. And I just found it to be fascinating. And so at the end of the day, because I came about this close to choosing ID, and I think what really sealed it for me at the end was two things. One was the procedural aspect of things. So I really enjoyed the opportunity to get to deliver therapeutics in an immediate way to folks. And I really, really enjoyed that, where someone's coming in and they can't swallow because they've got a bad stricture in their esophagus. And I go down and I dilate and I stretch it open, and 3 days later, they're eating regular food. It's so immediate. And I really, really enjoyed that. I think that was one of the big things for me. The other thing that I was very surprised about, and I think as you guys are starting to look to do some of your rotations and starting to think about what specialty you might want to go into, one of the things I would really encourage you to watch is, what is the personality of the people that you're interacting with? It's very interesting. So every specialty, by the nature of the medicine you practice, tends to attract people with similar personality traits. So for example, surgeons tend to be highly confident. They tend to have a lot of interest in working with their hands. They tend to really enjoy anatomy. So that tends to attract people with certain personality traits. And so the stereotypical surgeon, most people fall into that stereotype pretty well because it tends to attract like-minded people. And so what you'll find as you're going through your various rotations is that the people that you're working with are going to be very similar. And so if you go into a rotation and you say, I really, really love, this specialty, And everybody around here is just miserable and unhappy all the time. That's probably not a good place for you to be. So it's something really, really important to watch out for. And for me, every person I ever met who was a gastroenterologist was happy. They were interesting. They were funny. They enjoyed their job. They just liked going to work every day. And I thought, okay, I can get in with this. This is definitely going to work for me. So I applied to GI fellowship, which is incredibly competitive. But I got in and did my 3 years of GI fellowship. So that was 14 years after high school. And then I got and finished my GI fellowship. And so I've been out about 6 years now, and I love it. I still love going to work every day. I still love doing my procedures. I still love seeing my patients in clinic. It's just fantastic. I just don't think there's a better specialty, obviously. So I really personally enjoy it. So if anybody's out there thinking about doing the military, I would certainly be happy to talk to you about it, but I would highly encourage you to, consider it. There's value in so far as that, you're going to come out of residency debt free, and there's some real value to that. But for me, it was more about the camaraderie. It was more about the esprit de corps. I really just loved the people that were there. I mean, everyone's very mission oriented. Everyone's very focused on team. There's a lot of collaboration, to, I think, at greater extent, even than you get in a lot of the civilian residencies. And I really, really enjoyed that. So now I've gotten out of the military. So about a year ago, I got out and transitioned over to private practice. Very different world. But it's the medicine's the same. It's just a matter of who you're working with and who you're working for. So if any of you ever think about doing the military, definitely you should consider it. It was a great experience for me, and I got to go to some really cool places and see some really interesting diseases. So definitely worth considering. Okay. So for the case study, I am really interested to bring this case to you guys. This is a really cool one. So I've got my chat window on. I would love to give you guys a little bit of the history and then let you guys maybe ask a couple of questions. I'll give you just a little bit of a basic prompt and let you guys ask some questions. What kinds of questions would you want to be asking this patient if they were sitting in front of you? So I know none of you have actually practiced medicine, but this is a great way to kind of warm it up a little bit. So let me give you the basic idea and then let you guys, tell me what information would you want to know to try to figure out what this patient has. So this patient I saw when I was a first-year fellow. So I was very early in my training, and she's 37 years old. She's a mom of 3. She's coming in with a complaint of chronic diarrhea, and she's been having diarrhea every day for 4 years. And so upwards of 9 or 10 stools a day. That is basically been her norm. And when I asked her, well, why didn't you ever come in before now to get it picked up, to get it looked at? She's like, well, I'm watching my kids and I've been homeschooling a couple of them. And it's just, I just don't have time and I just can't do it. So just never did. So that's the basic story. So I'm going to pause for a second and watch the chat window. What's some more information you guys might want to know? What are some questions you would want to ask this patient to try to figure out what's going on? So if you know that she's got just diarrhea for 4 years, what's more stuff that you would want to know? So, and while those chat messages are coming up, while we're waiting to see what people are going to ask. So the underlying message here that I want to pass on to you guys with this, and what I hope to convey with this case study, is how important it is to think beyond the obvious. Okay. So remember, the title of the presentation was, in medicine and in money, things aren't always what they seem. And, in this case, that is really no exception. So we need to think beyond just the simple. So we've got one that's just come in here. What medications are you on? Great question. Love that one. So right now she's not really on much. She's on a cholesterol medication. And she's on, I think it was lisinopril, one blood pressure medication, but nothing really impressive. What types of food do you eat? Great question. Just a fairly regular diet. She doesn't have any kind of restrictions. She's tried messing around with things. She went dairy-free for a while. That didn't change anything. She went gluten-free for a while. That didn't change anything. Did the diarrhea start out a little and then worsen? Ooh, yeah, I love that question. So what's the progression? What's the trend? Yeah, it's definitely been getting worse over the last 4 years. Yeah, so it started out, it was, let's see, when it was like 4 years ago, it was, 2 or 3 a day, and it's gradually just gone up and up and up, and 6 a day, 7 a day. Now it's about 9 a day. What is your weight status? So she's frustrated because she's actually been gaining a little bit of weight, despite the fact that she's having all this diarrhea. She's actually been gaining weight, and she's kind of annoyed. So other things that you guys might be interested in: she hasn't been having any blood in her stool. She's really not having significant abdominal pain. She's like I said, she doesn't have any food restrictions, no fevers or night sweats or anything weird like that. No thyroid disease that we know of. That's a question from Jennifer. Jacqueline asked, did she find herself in constant pain throughout the day? Happily, no significant abdominal pain. So anyway, so that's kind of the basic story for her. So as I'm going through my differential diagnosis and trying to figure out, what are some things that she could have? Well, she could have Crohn's disease. Okay, that's an idea. She could have something called ulcerative colitis, which is very similar to Crohn's disease, but it's an inflammatory condition that affects just the colon. She could have some weird chronic infection. She could have like a parasite or some long-term infection like that. No travel history that was significant, but it's always possible. She could have something called celiac disease. I'm seeing people ask, does it happen to any other people in their family? No one else in their family has anything, just her. And so I'm going through this whole history and I'm figuring out, okay, so now I'm saying, okay, now I've got enough information. Let's start doing some tests. And so I'm prepping her or I'm getting some stool samples just to make sure she doesn't have a chronic infection. That comes back negative. And then I decide to check for something called celiac disease. So celiac disease, if you've seen stuff at the grocery store that's gluten-free, that's because of patients who have celiac disease. So gluten is a protein that's found in wheat. So it's in wheat-based flour, which means it's basically in everything except for rice and corn. And so celiac disease patients, they have significant inflammation of their small intestine. That leads to malabsorption and therefore later on diarrhea, vitamin deficiencies, iron deficiency in particular. And so I test her for celiac, and lo and behold, her celiac disease is positive. I was like, oh, great. Okay, that sounds good. I can fix celiac disease. Just put her on a gluten-free diet. So I decided I was going to get her set up for an upper endoscopy. So a camera test to go down into the stomach and then into the small intestine and take biopsies and see what's really going on down there. But then something really hit me, and it was really nagging at me. Someone, see who had asked, Anirudh, I apologize if I messed up that name, asked, what was your weight status? So she was gaining weight, and that doesn't make sense because celiac disease, like I said, it's a malabsorptive condition. And so if she is having diarrhea that's from celiac disease and it's bad enough that it's 9 a day, she should be losing weight like crazy, and she just wasn't. And so I said, okay, well, there's got to be something else going on. She definitely has celiac, but maybe there's a second thing also. So I started doing some research, and I found some reports of this condition called microscopic colitis and its association with celiac disease. And it's basically an inflammatory condition that causes a chronic, horrible watery diarrhea. And I was like, oh, awesome. I'll bet that's what this is. She's got this weird other microscopic colitis entity in addition to the celiac, and that's the thing causing her diarrhea. I'm brilliant. This is great. So I set her up for the endoscopy, and I said, you know what? We're going to do a colonoscopy so I can go take some random biopsies and make sure that that's what's going on. I'm going to treat you with some steroids. You're going to be good to go. And so we bring her in for the endoscopy. We go down, and her small intestine looks floridly like celiac disease. I mean, the whole thing is just moth-eaten and horrible looking. I'm like, oh, bam, I'm going to fix this. This is easy. So we take some biopsies, and I'm congratulating myself. I'm all excited. And then I'm spinning her around, getting her ready to do her colonoscopy. I'm like, okay, let's go find that microscopic colitis. We're going to go 2 for 2. And I put the colonoscope in and immediately ran into a problem. The first thing I found as soon as I got into her rectum was a 4-centimeter rectal cancer, which I absolutely was not expecting to find. And it turned out that was actually the source of the diarrhea. So this gal definitely had celiac disease, but she definitely also had rectal cancer. And rectal cancer is always on your list of things to think about. But, at 37, and this has been going on for a couple of years. Man, that was really out of the blue. And so, we sent her over to surgery. They got her cancer out. We sent her to hemonc. They did some chemo and got the remainder of the lymph nodes cleared. And she's 6 years in remission now and doing great. But I tell that story to illustrate the fact that in medicine, if you put your blinders on and you focus on the thing that's right in front of you and you miss the opportunity to be methodical about all the stuff that you should be looking for, you potentially miss a second thing that's going on. That's the real danger. It's like in orthopedics, if someone comes in with a broken leg and you look and you go, oh, they've got this big spiral fracture through the tibia, but then you're not paying attention and you miss the little baby fracture off of the ankle, then you fix one thing and you miss another. So that was the thing that I learned from this case study, was the fact that in GI and in particular, but in medicine just more generally, it really is important to pay attention to every little detail, because you never know when you're going to end up missing a second thing. And I tell you what, this kind of thing happens to me all the time. I'll have someone that comes in with anemia and I go in and do an endoscopy and they've got horrible ulcers, but then I spin them around and take a look and they've got ulcerative proctitis, right? Or they've got Crohn's disease, but they also have fatty liver. I mean, we see this kind of thing all the time, and it's kind of scary because it's easy to miss stuff, but it's also the thing that makes it a lot of fun, because it really gives you an opportunity to fix a lot of stuff. And you kind of feel like Sherlock Holmes a little bit, just finding tough cases to solve that no one else can solve. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it personally. So Suhas asked me if I could talk a little bit about some money stuff. And I want to give you guys 3 specific things that I think would be really helpful for you as you're prepping for your end of your pre-med years and into your medical school and then residency years. Okay. So, because I've been doing financial coaching for quite some time, I mean, years at this point. And what's really interesting to me is I've done coaching at my church for, widows on Social Security. They're making $13,700 a year on Social Security. And I've done coaching with dermatologists making $600,000-$700,000 a year. And the thing that's always amazing to me is that everybody makes the same mistakes. So doctors make the same mistakes that people making $13,000 a year make. We just make the errors with bigger numbers. We just have more zeros on the end of our errors. And so I want to give you guys these little pearls to think about, so that when you start heading into your medical school years, you start thinking critically about money, so that you don't fall super far behind the way that most doctors unfortunately do. Because the truth is that most people just don't pay attention to the money stuff. And then they just end up getting bitten later on by, mountains and mountains of crushing debt. And then they lose flexibility in their job. They lose their autonomy. They get stuck with these, really intense debt payments that pigeonhole them into taking a job that maybe they weren't excited about. So we see it all the time. All right. So here's a quick quiz question. So what are the top 3 professions for millionaires? This is in the United States. So just throw it out there, so any profession, doctor, lawyer, whatever. What do you guys think are some of the top professions of millionaires? So the answer I'm gonna give you in a second. I'm gonna let people start throwing up some ideas. I'm seeing IT, entrepreneurs, finance, athletes, business. So some really great guesses. Yeah. Business owners, attorney. So the answer to this is coming from the largest study of American millionaires ever done. It's the National Study of Millionaires. Was done in 2017, I think 2017 or 18. And this was fascinating to me. So the top 3 professions. So number 1 is accountants. And that kind of makes some sense, right? So accountants have good jobs, steady income. They're pretty good with numbers. They're paying attention. Okay. Makes sense. Number 2 is engineer. Okay. That makes some sense, right? So smart guys, smart gals, they know their stuff. They're very methodical. They're very systems oriented. They pay attention. They develop plans. So, okay. That makes sense. Doctor did not make the top 5. Attorney did not make the top 5. Athlete didn't make the top 5. Entertainer didn't make the top 5. Okay, Jacqueline Mehta, you win the game. Awesome. Teachers. Number 3 was school teacher. And that kind of blew my mind that of the top 3 professions for American millionaires, doctor got beat out by teacher. I mean, you think about the salaries that most teachers make in public schools, especially, it's wretched. It's terrible. And yet more of them retire as millionaires than doctors. So what are we missing? And I'll tell you what we're missing is that I'm going to go through a few things here, but what we're missing is the fundamental reality that you cannot math your way and you cannot earn your way out of stupidity. So there are just so many ways to make dumb errors with your money, and school teachers, I think they just do it better than we do. And I think to a certain extent, we're kind of set up for failure. So, we spend 4 years in college. A lot of people are on student loans, 4 years in med school. Almost everybody's on student loans. And then in residency and fellowship, you're making as much as a school teacher, maybe, but you're making very little. You're working all the time. It's hard to make any side hustle income. And so you're kind of stuck for a decade or a decade and a half, just with debt piling up. It kind of becomes part of your life. You become numb to it. And then when you get out, you're like, I've been holding my breath for 10 years, waiting for the day when it's my turn, when I can go on a vacation, I can buy the car that I want or whatever. And then you stop holding your breath. You buy 2 Teslas and you buy, a big house, and you send your kids to private school and you buy into a practice, and none of those things are evil. But then you look up and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm $1.5 million in debt. How did that happen? So let's go through a couple of things that'll help you. So take a look at these 2 pictures here. Okay. So the picture on the left, this is what most people think of when they think of millionaires. And honestly, this is what people think of a lot of times of doctors too. And the truth is that American millionaires look more like this picture on the right, this couple with a small house, and it's not real flashy. It's not real expensive, but these are the people that are, look like they're not rich, but they are building wealth because they're spending less than they make. And this is the kind of thing that you need to keep in your mind. So my grandmother was a school teacher. She taught remedial reading in public schools for like 40 years. And my grandfather was a postal worker. And when they retired, they were multimillionaires. Okay. Just because they made smart choices, they lived on less than they made, and they saved and invested all the time, just constantly. So it's doable. If they could do it, by golly, doctors with our income, we better be able to do it. So let's look at just a few things that I want to talk about that you need to do with regard to trying to get your finances in order. So number 1 is to become socially indifferent. Now, this doesn't mean that you stop caring about people. What I mean by socially indifferent is that you stop paying attention to what the people down your street are doing, or what the other doctors in your practice are doing, or what your friends on Facebook are doing. Don't try to compare yourself. Like if you try to keep up with the Joneses are all on Facebook now. The Joneses are all on Pinterest, and they post their highlight reels. They post every good thing that's happened, all the pictures of their awesome vacation, their new pets, their new cars, and all that's fine. And you can celebrate with them, but don't get sucked into the bear trap of thinking, oh, they're doing that, I should be able to do that too. It should be my turn. Why not? You start doing that, and very quickly you will find that that is going to spiral out of control. First off, the thing I always tell people, the Joneses, if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, they're probably broke. Okay. Most of the doctors that I see out, talking about all the stuff that they're doing, I have no idea if they're making money or if they're building wealth or not. Okay. All I know is they're spending a lot of money, but is it more or less than they made? I have no idea. All I can control is what I make and how much I'm spending, but don't try to keep up with the Joneses. The second thing on that is there is no limiting principle on what is enough. Okay. So is enough going to be, you have a bigger house. Well, then the person down the street buys a new car and you're like, man, my car is like 10 years old. I really would love to get a new car. I'll do that. And then the next person down the street starts sending their kids to private schools. You're like, I kind of think I want to do that too. But it just keeps escalating. There isn't a ceiling on that. There's no asymptote. You have unlimited capacity to spend. And it gets worse as you get into higher income brackets. Another thing that I mentioned a second ago is the phrase, when will it be my turn? That is one of the most dangerous things. As soon as I hear someone say, I feel like it's my turn to buy X or to do Y, instantly I know that person's about to make a really foolhardy financial decision. You've really got to be careful with that. Another thing to think about, choice of home matters a lot. There's a great book that y'all should read called The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley. It was written in about 1997 or so. And one of the things he talks about is how where you choose to live really influences the kinds of things you buy. So if you're living in $1 million home type neighborhood, the kinds of things that you're going to see people spend their money on and buy, that's going to influence you. You tend to imitate the people that are around you. So if you're living in a neighborhood with $250,000 houses versus $1 million houses, your spending habits, your saving habits will be very different. So it's very important to think about where you're going to live. Okay. Number two, we're going to be socially indifferent. And number two, we're going to make debt elimination a priority. This is something that just frustrates me to no end, is when I hear people saying like, oh, well, it's student loans. Everybody's got them. They're going to be around, whatever. I'm not in a hurry to pay them off. It drives me crazy when I hear that, because I know that the debt is shackling them and potentially limiting them from being able to do the things that they really want to do. And what I always tell people is that your flexibility to make your own choices is more important than returns that you can get on investing. I would much rather have autonomy than have a nest egg that got built a little bit faster. And so the easiest way to get your autonomy back is to not owe anybody any money. So for example, my wife and I decided early on that we were going to make it a point to pay off all of her student loans before I finished my fellowship. And we knuckled down and we paid off those loans fast. And we lived in an apartment that was a lot smaller than we could afford. We lived on my income alone, and we saved or paid down debt with 100% of her income. And so then when we had eliminated all the debt, and then we got to a place where we were having kids and she decided she wanted to take a break from working for a while, there was no financial downside to that. It was a super easy decision. We could just say, you know what, we've already been living on one income anyway, and we have no debts. Easy. That was a 5-minute conversation. It was so easy. And it's just hard to do that kind of thing if you've got a lot of debt that's hamstringing you. The faster you pay off the debt, the less it costs overall. I mean, that's just a basic truism of compound interest. So if you pay off a loan in 30 years versus paying off a loan in 5 years, it is a lot cheaper to do that, because the interest will really, really hose you over a long period of time. Another thing that is something that I want to just throw out there is going to be very common for you guys to hear, that certain kinds of debt are good debt or are okay debt. The truth is, there's no such thing as good debt. There's debt, and then that's it. There's just debt. And the thing I always tell people is, if there was such a thing as good debt, you'd wrap it up and put it in a Christmas present for your family at Christmas. And nobody does that. No one says, hey, you know what, for Christmas this year, I got you a loan, right? That'd be ridiculous. But people use that excuse, or use that, I guess, that idea of quote unquote good debt, or leverage is another thing you'll hear a lot, to justify going further and further into debt. And unfortunately, it just ends up just shackling you. It puts you in bondage. And so I want to see you all have freedom. I want to see you all have choices, and getting out of debt is a really important part of that. And then the final thing, this is going to sound obvious, but it's so amazing how infrequently people were able to adhere to this. So spend little, save much. So spend less than you make. This is just so basic, and yet people just have a hard time following through. So what I generally recommend for doctors is to save 18 to 20% of your annual income. This is once you've started paying off your debt. And so I tend to focus on paying off all debts, all non-mortgage debts, until they're just gone, and then start hammering away 20% of your income every year, like clockwork. Your Roth IRA, your 401k, you're investing in things that earn you interest or earn you money. But you got to be planning for the future, because no one else is coming to save you. One of the things that I think has really been driven home for me over the years with financial coaching is that success with money doesn't depend so much on what you're willing to do for it. It's more about what you're willing to sacrifice. And so if you're willing to drive a car that's not as nice as you could otherwise be, so that you can have the long-term goal of paying off your debt sooner and becoming financially independent sooner. Or if you're going to live in a smaller house than you otherwise would, or you travel a little bit less extravagantly. Those are the kinds of choices that you have to make every day, every week, every month, to achieve those financial goals. But always live on less than you make. If you're used to living like a student now, just stick with that. Just stick with that all the way through your training, until you get your debts paid off, you'll get them paid off, you'll get them paid off so much faster than everybody else. And while, everyone's trying to figure out, do I have to do public service loan forgiveness program, or do I have to get stuck in this job that I don't really want, but it pays a little bit better? You're living large. You're like, man, the world is my oyster. I can work anywhere I want. I can do anything I want. So that's the things I want to see for you guys, because I know that that's the quickest path to financial freedom. So a couple things I want to just give you guys just as a thank you for coming on. This is something I put together just for you guys. I've never put this together before, but I thought this would be kind of a cool thing for you guys to have. I call this medical school mess to residency success. And so for you, once you guys are getting ready, and you can use this while you're a pre-med too, but I've got a couple of guides in here on how to crush your interviews, how to write a good CV. I tell you what, I was on an admissions committee for a couple of years, and this was so frustrating to me. So many applications, so many interviews. I would just sit down and within 30 seconds of reading the CV or listening to the interviewee, within 30 seconds, I'd know, okay, this is over before it's begun. I'm not interested in this person. Very, very easy to do that. And I want you guys to be very successful. So this guide, it's like I said, it's free. You can use that link right there. It's to help you guys with your interviews, with your resume writing. And then it's got some guides on debt elimination and getting rid of, how to get rid of debt. Cause I think the thing that really hamstrings most people is they just don't have a plan. And this is a way that you can have a really good plan. The second thing I was going to invite you guys to, if you're interested, it's free. And something I'm putting together this fall. It's an online summit called Marriage and Money, MD. And so it's a lot of the same stuff that we're talking about. I've got 18 physicians and physician spouses that are going to come and speak about topics related to marriage, related to money, basic and advanced. And it's going to be great. I'm super excited about it. And I want to invite you guys to come out to it. Again, it's totally free. And so far I haven't given out any coupons for any discounts, but because I love you guys, I'm throwing this out there. So if you use the coupon code PREMEDSCENE, all one word, then you get 25% off the all access pass. But the main part of the conference is free for anybody. And, you can sign up, and then you can even watch the replays for the next couple of days if you want. So, the links are in the chat. It's all for you guys. Like I said, I want to do as much as I can to help you guys, because I know when I was going through pre-med stuff, there was just so many questions and so many things I wish I'd had the answers to. And so, I want to just do anything I can to help you guys. So, well, that's all I got. I'll stop sharing my screen now so we can see some people. And then I'll turn it back over to Suhas and Michael, and let you guys tell us where we're going next.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lacey, so much for your presentation. I'm sure that we all got some insight, especially in terms of financial management. We all got some insight with that. Thank you so much. It's always great to have something extra outside of just medicine to look into. But right now we'll have our Q&A session. So anyone who has any questions, feel free to unmute or type them in the chat, and I can read them out to Dr. Lacey.
While everyone is typing the questions, I did want to add, I did put both the links in the chat. So anyone, you can easily get it from there if you need to.
So maybe while we wait for questions to pour in, I'll ask you a question myself. How was your pre-med journey? How was your medical school journey? Which part of the process did you enjoy the most? Which part of the process did you learn the most? Could you give us an overview on that?
Yeah. So so my pre-med journey was a little rushed. I went into freshman year as a business major, planning to go into marketing. And spring break of my freshman year, I was on a mission trip to Mexico as a translator, and felt that God was calling me to a medical career. And so when I got back home, I changed I changed my major to biomedical sciences for pre-med, and crammed the entire pre-med curriculum into 3 years instead of 4. Another thing I don't advise people to do. It was pretty crazy. But I tell you what, it was formative. It was transformative for me. It was incredibly valuable. And I certainly wouldn't trade it for anything. For the med school journey, so I went to University of Texas in San Antonio for medical school. And here's something I would want to pass on to you guys that I feel like I figured out too late. And that is that the quality of your education and training is massively more dependent on who you are as an individual than it is on the quote unquote quality of your institution. So by all national metrics and rankings, I went to fairly average public school for both college and medical school, but I don't think that's right. I got world-class training. I really did. I had lots of opportunities and I went after it, man. I took on every challenge I could. I went and sought out opportunities to learn from people. I was constantly asking questions, trying to learn more, do more, be better. And, I tell you what, going in the military, I got a chance to work with people from legitimately all over the country, from coast to coast. I mean, there are plenty of docs from Harvard that can't untie my shoelaces when it comes to medicine. And there's plenty of folks that went to, Podunk University that I think are absolute superstars that I seek advice from. So don't get sucked into the trap of thinking that where you go to school matters all that much. Okay. Anatomy at Harvard and anatomy at Florida International University are the same. Nothing's changed in 200 years. And so don't be afraid to go someplace that you think is maybe quote unquote, not the best place. Go someplace that you're going to enjoy, that you're going to like, that you like the people that are there. You like the students that you meet on your orientation day. You like the professors that you interact with. Go someplace that you like to be, and then just suck the marrow out of the experience and you will get super phenomenal training. It's just not going to be a problem.
Absolutely. We have another question here asking what percentage of your work is in the financial side versus medical work?
Well, I'm a full-time gastroenterologist, so 100% of my main job is clinical practice. The scope of practice stuff that I do, I started doing that a couple of years ago, just as a side thing, and it's really just a side a side gig thing, and it doesn't make a ton of money or anything. I do it because I'm passionate about it. I enjoy this stuff, and I'm baffled at medical schools not teaching this stuff. And I feel like that's bad and needs to be fixed. So really 100% of the stuff I do during the day is medical.
And on the topic of financial management or just finances in general, a lot of people might pursue or might at least consider private practice over just being an employee under a hospital for maybe financial reasons. What is your outlook on that? The pros, the cons? I know that with private practice, there's more responsibility, some more administrative work. What's your overview on that?
Okay, I love this question. This is a great question. So in 2018, that was the first year that the national surveys of physicians showed that more people were in employed physician roles rather than employer physician roles. So the private practice model shifted to finally being under 50% for the first time about 3 years ago. That ratio has started to reverse a little bit. I think ever since COVID last year, when everybody shut everything down, I think people started to realize, oh, you know what? Maybe that employed physician job that I had, maybe that's not as secure as I thought it was. And so, I saw all kinds of stories last year of entire departments getting shut down and physicians getting replaced, or hospitals simply going under. And yeah, from my standpoint, what you're trading going from employee physician to private practice, you're trading security for autonomy. Okay. So if you're an employee, then you're banking on that company being around and being solvent and being, being able to continue paying you. And if you're working for a big enough company, like say Kaiser Permanente in California, or one of the big hospital systems in Houston or Atlanta or something, then you've probably got a decent shot at that. You're relatively stable and secure. You don't have a lot of the administrative hassle of running your own business, trying to hire people, fire people, train people, manage suppliers, vendors. So there's a lot less work that's involved in some respects, but what you lose is autonomy. Okay. So you are at the whims of your masters. Okay. And so if they have particular quotas, like you have to meet certain metrics, you have to get so many patients a day, you have to have so many RVUs. RVU is a measurement of work in medicine. And so if you have to have so many RVUs per year that you're producing, you have X number of hours of vacation time every year, things like that. So you're just hoping that they're going to be good to you, basically, and you got to get lucky. With private practice, you're the master. You can do whatever you want, right? So it's your business, it's your baby. You want to take off, you take off. Now if you take off, you're not making money. That's the downside. And so your paycheck is dependent on you working. And so what you're getting though, is you're getting that autonomy. You get to control what is happening in your business. No one's telling you what to do. The downside, no one's telling you what to do. So you've got to kind of think about it. And one of the reasons I started the scope of practice is because I felt like a lot of people shy away from private practice because they're nervous about it. But here's the thing. If you can get through med school, which all of you are going to, by the way, if you can get through med school, you can be a business owner. It's not that hard. There's nothing I can think of that I've done that's harder than getting through med school. Maybe my first 6 months of GI fellowship. I take that back. That was probably harder. But if you can get through your medical training, you can do business. It's a skill set like anything else. So you can learn these things. But that's the trade-off. For me, like I said, I want to be in control of me. I want to be in control of my destiny. And to me, it's worth it. It's worth the extra work. It's worth the extra hassle. Frankly, I enjoy it. I love leading my team. I love getting to train people. I love getting to, really shape the destiny of everybody that works with me and works for me. I enjoy it personally. But it is a lot more work. That's true.
I see. Yeah. What do you recommend high school students to do to get ahead with, the pre-med track ahead of, college, even though they're still in high school?
Oh, that's a fabulous question. Okay. So the key thing that you have to do if you're in high school, the number one thing you have to do is start college prepared to assassinate your first year. Okay. And I use that word very deliberately. You've got to go in and just kill it your first year. The number one thing that kills med school interviewees is their GPA. And what happens, I see this so often, is that you dink around your freshman year, you get a 2.6, and man, does that not average well. And you just never can quite pull it up above about a 3.3 or 3.4. And that is just not going to be competitive in a lot of places. So if you're in high school, the number one thing you can do, don't worry about your classes that you're currently taking. None of them, anything you learn in high school, you're going to burn through all of that in about 6 weeks in college. And anything you learn in college, you're going to burn through that in about 6 weeks in med school. It just doesn't matter that much. But what you do have to do is whatever your classes you're taking, you just got to crush that first year. Go for a 4.0, 3.8, but set yourself up for success so that way you're not, struggling to make a comeback your last 2 or 3 years.
One piece of advice do you recommend as being the most important? You mentioned quite a bit during your presentation and also answering these questions, but if you could just put one piece of advice out there to pre-health and pre-med students, what would it be?
Just one, huh? Man, that's a tough one. Just one advice to pre-med and pre-health students. Here's what I would tell you. The process of medical education is an inherently dehumanizing experience. And it is really important for you to work to maintain a control of who you are as a person and who you want to be as a physician. And here's what I mean by that. Until you've gone through medical school or you've seen someone go through medical school, firsthand, like someone you're married to, there's just no way to really understand what is required. So if you think you're busy in college now, wait till you get to med school. Oh my goodness, it is intense. And you'll spend hours and hours in the lecture hall, then you'll spend hours and hours in the library every night, every weekend. And so when your friends come into town and they're coming to visit and they're like, hey, let's go out. We're going to go party this weekend. We're going to go on a road trip. And you're like, dude, I got an exam in 3 weeks. I gotta study. And they're going to say, in 3 weeks, what are you talking about? But that is what's required to do this job well. And I think that's something that, unfortunately, it tends to lend itself to kind of crushing one's spirit if you're not careful, because you kind of get sucked into this world where you're like, I have to study all the time. I have to train all the time. You start to neglect things. You start to neglect your health. You start to neglect your friends. If you're married, you start to neglect your spouse. This is one of the reasons why I put this Marriage and Money MD Summit together, is because the divorce rate for physicians is 40% and climbing. It's terrible. And if you've gone through that, I don't mean that by way of trying to guilt or shame you. I promise it's just one of those things that it's so devastating to have to go through that. And I don't want anyone to have to go through that. But what tends to suffer is our relationships, our health, our interests, our hobbies, our personality. And it's one of the things that leads to burnout. So don't lose yourself. Make time for yourself, make time for the people you love, and just decide that you're going to hold on to some of those things. Because trust me when I say the amount of time that you're going to have to spend with your training, it's going to try to beat that out of you. So you got to hold on tight.
Can you tell us more about your role with Ramsey Solutions? You mentioned that as being part of the financial side of things you do.
Yeah, so that's how I cut my teeth with financial coaching. If you guys heard of Dave Ramsey and Financial Peace University, I taught that class at my church like I think about 13 times or something over the years, and really, really enjoyed it. And that's actually kind of how I started into the scope of practice. Is I started getting asked to do some talks for the residents and the students at my hospital and the OR nurses and things like that, and just kind of launched from there. So I got my financial coaching certification through them, but I mean, I don't have a current role with them or anything. I haven't done anything with them in a few years, but that's where I got my my more formal coaching training.
Another person asks, and you kind of went over this with finances in terms of planning ahead, planning when you're young. Another student asks, what advice would you have giving your younger self, knowing what you know now?
What advice would I give to my younger self, knowing what I know now? Here's something I would say. So here's something we haven't really covered yet. From an academic side of things, okay? I had to make a choice when I was a first-year medical student. I came to a realization, I think it was probably during my first 6 weeks, I came to a realization that it was not going to be possible to spend the time necessary to memorize the sheer volume of information that was coming at us in order to ace every single test. I realized that it was just not going to be possible for me. And so I had to decide, how do I want to study? How do I want to learn? And I made what was at the time a very conscious and very gut-wrenching kind of choice. I decided that I wasn't going to care that much about my grades anymore. Obviously pass everything and obviously do as well as possible. I still did fine. I got A's and B's in med school and did fine. But I wasn't going to try to get hundreds on every single test. That was not going to be a goal for me. What I wanted to make sure that I came out of med school with was an ability to diagnose and treat patients. And in order to do that, what you need to do is you have to turn your brain into a hard drive. And so what that requires is not just information and data, okay? Because you do need to know all that stuff. But I know lots of people that studied for facts and learned everything and memorized everything for the test, and they didn't hold on to it very well. In my case, what I decided is that I was going to study in order to learn systems, in order to create a brain that was capable of tackling problems that I'd never seen before. So that way, when I would start, so that way now, when I see patients that are presenting in a way that I've never seen a presentation before, I can think through it. I don't have to sit there and go, okay, on page 674 of the textbook, like, if that's where you are, then it's going to be very hard to synthesize information in a way that allows you to extract it at the right moment. And so for me, I had to change my way of studying and change my way of thinking about how I was going to prepare for exams. And not everybody makes that choice, and that's fine. But that's what I decided that I needed to do, is that I needed to come out of medical school prepared to be an excellent physician. And if I happen to ace some tests along the way, awesome.
As a last question to wrap up our session, what are your hours like? Are you on call ever? And
yes, ever, always.
how often do you see patients also versus doing procedures?
Yeah, great question. Great questions. So I'll answer the question directly, and then let me give you a slight riff on that. So my hours are 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. most days. And then I have call on weekends. I'm the new guy in the practice, so I'm doing about every other weekend call right now. Once in our group, once you make partner, then everyone shares equally among the rest of the weekends. So I'm on call a lot right now. When I was in the military, I spent 5 years as a solo practitioner at the various sites that I was at. I was on call every day. Now, that didn't mean I was at the hospital every night, overnight, or every weekend or anything like that, but I was available in case I needed to go in. So I would say on on balance, I keep fairly regular clinic hours. So 7 to 5, 8 to 5, something like that. And then I usually get to work a couple hours early so I can prepare my charts for the day, answer any emails, fill any medication requests, things like that. So usually 2 hours of work per day outside of just regular clinic hours, and then call on the weekends. But I'll say that, but also every practice is a little bit different in terms of how you do it. It depends on how big your group is. It depends on how many people are in the practice. It depends on how busy your hospital is. So, I mean, if you're working at a lower acuity facility that's a little bit more rural, you're probably not going to be in the hospital as much as you are if you're in an inner city, for example, just in terms of patient volume. And then the last part of that question was, how often do I see patients versus doing procedures? So I'm splitting about 50-50 clinic versus procedures right now. 55-45, maybe a little slightly heavier on the clinic, but that's about right. And I think that's been pretty typical for most of the gastroenterologists that I've seen. As you get more senior and you start to collect more patients over time, a lot of times we'll start to offload some of the clinic patients, the really easy stuff, to some of our nurse practitioners and our PAs. And we tend to focus more on the procedures, which are the things that only we can do. So maybe it starts to skew a little heavier towards procedures as you get farther in, maybe 60%, 65. But I'd say that's about the right ratio.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up our session for today. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Lacey. We really appreciate that you take your time out of your busy schedule to join us, and for discussing topics that are really of interest, like financial management, and especially with your specialty being gastroenterology. For our audience, to receive a certificate for the session, you must pass the quiz on our website, which is now uploaded. And be sure to join us next week for our next virtual shouting session. Actually, not next week, it's going to be on September 2nd for our next virtual shouting session with Dr. Janaszek at 7 p.m. Central, as always. And again, thank you, Dr. Lacey, for your time. Have a great night, everyone.
My pleasure. Thanks.